I love what I teach because it is relevant to the world. Hi, welcome to Mr. Parker Meets. I'm Stewart Parker. All right, so hi, welcome. My name is Stewart Parker. Again, I am the 2021 Orange County Public School Teacher of the Year, and this is my another episode of Mr. Parker Meets, and I'm really excited because what we're talking about in this episode is something really important to my heart, and this is I'm talking to some social studies teachers, and I love social studies, and these are two amazing civics teachers in our district, and so I'd like to showcase kind of what we do in civics, because I think we do a pretty darn good job in Orange County preparing our students to be active and engaged citizens, so much more than just the civics EOC that they take. We're training them and instructing them on how to be those agents of social change for the future and to make our community and our world a better place. And I'm always about local and global and how we can get our students in there. So I'm really excited to have both of these fine educators with us. So I'm going to introduce both of them. And then the first question is, why did you get into teaching? What brought you, what led you into teaching? Because I just like to hear that. I think every teacher has a great story as to why they're here. So first we have Richardo Delfosse. He is a civics teacher at Lockhart Middle School. He was one of the finalists alongside me this year for Orange County Teacher of the Year. So I'm excited to get to talk to you about this. So tell us, Richardo, how did you, your path lead you to teaching and to civics?
Sure. So I took the one and the most unconventional route I believe you could take to get into civics teaching. I like to always preface with, I thought I would never be a teacher. I looked at it and I saw it and I was a student, and looking from that perspective, I was like, no way, this is not for me. You get what I'm saying? But I went to college at Florida A&M University. Want to give a big shout out in the background right there.
Yeah.
But I went to FAMU and I majored in political science, and pre-law was my minor. So I knew I wanted to go to law school. So I went to law school and things were going great. Second year interning and everything like that at the state, the public defender's office, the state attorney's office, and so on and so forth. And so around the going into my third year of law school, which is your final year of law school, I was approached with an opportunity to kind of be a mentor and teach law before I even graduated. So it was like a big honor to have my professors come to me and say, hey, we entrust you with these students who are coming into our program to teach them the basics and the beginning courses of law and try to get them prepared and ready for, the rigors of traditional law school. So I did that for the summer and I loved it. I love interacting with people. I love talking with people. I love to see that light turn on when that switch actually flicks on and it's like, oh, wait, this is what I understand. This is what I need to know. And so the opportunity to do that just never left me. And I remember I walked to my professor who recommended me for the opportunity, and I was like, I think I got bit by the bug and everything like that. And I mean, mind you, lawyers make good money and everything like that. So when I left there and I, hopefully my wife doesn't watch this, but when I left there and I was like, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I think I kind of want to get into this teaching thing. She's like, wait a second, think about this. You get what I'm saying? And so, but at the end of the day, she's fully supportive, obviously. I'm just kidding with you, babe, if you do watch this. But, so long story short, I got hired by Valencia first, coming out of law school, to be an adjunct. And then when I got hired by Valencia, my wife was working at a private school at the time, and they knew I was looking for some other employment too. And so they hired me as a teacher, well, as the dean of the school, and I worked part-time in the classroom. And it developed my love even more. So then I finished off the year there, and I was like, you know what? I want the opportunity to grow more and to do more and interact with more people, because that private school was very small. And so I took the opportunity to go to Orange County, and I went to a job fair, got hired on the spot, and I'm here now 3 years later, working, loving it, social studies department chair. So I enjoy the idea of law, and I try to correlate that my law experience with the civic experience because they do relate so much. So that's what led me to this point.
Awesome. That's a great way to look at it. And kind of that roundabout, and everybody gets to teaching a different way, and no education is wasted, I would say. So the years you had through law school are definitely beneficial for you. Our other guest is Jenny Varvarigos. She is a civics teacher at Arbor Ridge K8. Full disclosure, my wife is Jenny's class hallway neighbor. She has worked with Jenny at Avalon Middle School and now at Arbor Ridge Middle School. And so I couldn't think of anybody better that I wanted to have as part of this conversation of civics education than Jenny, because I know her passion about this as well. So Jenny, introduce yourself and how you got into teaching and kind of your teaching path as well.
Hi, Jenny Varvarigos here. He's a hard act to follow. So mine's a little more straightforward than that. I also have a degree in political science, and then I also have a degree in sociology. And so I feel like he uses his law background, I use my sociology background to really incorporate how groups of people interact with the law and with the government, and how certain groups of people kind of tend to lean a certain way or vote a certain way or behave a certain way. So I've used that as kind of a bridge as well to get into civics. This is my 14th year. I started as a baby at 23, teaching high schoolers at Freedom High School. So that was an interesting experience. And this year will be, being my 14th year, it has been a very interesting year to teach in. So I've probably learned more this year regarding technology and the government than I've ever learned before. So both of my parents are teachers. My dad taught AP European history for 30 years. My mother is also retired English teacher and librarian. So I have known nothing but teaching since growing up in the home of two teachers. And I'm sure your kids can attest to that. So Stewart, I'm sure that they know what it's like. And I started out teaching American history and world history, but my degree is in American politics and policy. So this is really my specialty and my love. And very similar to Richardo is that talking about social change, and you, Stewart, talking about social change is really a passion I have. And so I can no better subject area to channel that than through civics.
So sometimes it probably hits y'all a lot when you tell people what you teach, but more importantly, who you teach, that you probably get a lot of questions of like, well, how can you really engage these 12 and 13-year-olds in political discourse and discussion and have these conversations because whatever. And so both of you have shown success in this. So what are some of the ways that you get your tween and teens in your classes really focusing on and understanding the importance of civic education? So just what are some awesome strategies and things that you use that work with this? Because I know that when I tell people I teach AP to ninth graders, they're like, whoa, how do you do that? And I can only imagine it's even far greater when you're like, I teach civics to seventh graders. So Jenny, we'll start with you. What are some things that y'all do that you do in your class to kind of encourage that political discourse with 12 and 13-year-olds?
Sure. Well, I guess first part of that is this generation, because of social media and technology, is so much more hyper aware. They have so much more understanding and knowledge than I feel like my generation ever did, because the only news that we were really exposed to is if your parents tended to watch the evening news or the local news. Whereas for them, it's Twitter, it's Instagram, it's Snapchat, it's TikTok. And so they are much more socially conscious and much more socially aware than I think my generation was because of the access to information. And one of the things that I try to do because of that is, one, I feel that I need to stay relevant. If I don't know, the social media outlets that they're using, the terminology and the lingo that they're using, or the platforms that they're using, or the issues that they care about, then I'm not going to be able to reach them. And so that's a really important part to me, is staying relevant for them. And the other part is using the news to teach the standards. And with everything that's happened in 2020 and 2021, it has been very challenging for us as a society, but it has been fantastic for me as a civics teacher to really just monopolize on all of these crazy historical events that have taken place, not only in the world, but here in the United States, or even just in Florida. So I think using the news, staying relevant, and building that rapport with them has really been helpful for me to be successful with civics and with the very difficult standards that they have to learn.
I find it interesting. You said something. I find it interesting how many kids say that when I talk about something, like, oh, I saw a video on TikTok about that. And I'm like, whoa, wait, because I thought TikTok was just them doing like weird viral dances and stuff like that. But I'm like, there's actually like learning. There's actually things on there about the news and about political stuff. So I find that really interesting that you have. Richardo, like, what is your response to teaching civics at 12, 13-year-olds?
So I'm going to go to the point that she was making at the end there. We've had the fortunate and unfortunate ability to be involved in the many, many news-related events that have occurred over the last few years. Especially, I hate the fact that we weren't in school around the time when, and it just is personal to me, when the Black Lives Matter movement and the killings of like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were coming ripe in our society, and they were being prevalent, and they were front page news. I would have loved to be able to talk to our kids about that, because there is so many different perspectives. And to go to a little bit more of like the kids I am teaching, I feel like I have a little bit of a cheat code. I'm teaching the kids that I grew up in this neighborhood. I grew up in this area. So their background and where they come from, and their economic status and their lifestyles, I kind of understand a little bit more, because I'm fortunate enough to say, well, I was you at one particular point in time. So being able to relate and correlate events is the biggest key of me staying relevant and keeping the kids engaged, and keeping them focused in how to mesh the standards with real life events. I think anybody who's ever walked my room, and I've had plenty of people walk my room from district level to and everything like that, I think the biggest thing you can always see is I'm trying to keep my kids engaged by first creating that relation at home. So the kids have something to relate to. If I can meet them at that basic standard level of, I kind of know where your home life is, or this is something you interact with on a daily basis, then I can wed that with what I'm teaching and make it engaging and relatable. So making it engaging, relatable, intriguing, interesting, and for anybody out there, you got to make it weird sometimes. You got to make it weird. You got to make them feel uncomfortable. I was talking about it earlier. I love grandmas. This is full disclaimer. I love grandmas. I love grandma. I'm sorry. So my partner. I love grandmas. Full disclaimer. But in a lot of my examples, grandmas are at the brunt end of a lot of violence. You get what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. But, it's the ways of just, bringing in engagement and making it relatable. And, it's not an easy subject to teach. And we're teaching a subject to 12 and 13-year-olds that 30 and 40-year-olds don't even understand. So just making it more relatable engaging them and meeting them where they're at is definitely the biggest thing I would say that kind of helps me teach the kids the content.
That's awesome. That, like, both of y'all just inspired me. Like, I was listening, I was like, that's just what I want I think it's awesome that y'all represent Orange County. I think y'all aren't the only two civics teachers that are like that. The ones that I've interacted with, our civics department, district-wide, y'all do a really good job, because the ones I get that come to me, they still remember a lot of the stuff that y'all go over when I hit my political geography stuff. So I love that y'all make it real to them and relevant for that. One thing I always love, because I'm a huge teaching strategies kind of nerd, I'm always looking for new ways and creative ways to do that. What are some things that y'all do? What's your favorite activities or strategies or things like that that you use in the classroom to kind of keep that engagement in there? I know you talked about using the news and stuff like that, but is there one, your favorite go-to lesson style or strategy or something like that that you would like to share with us? Because I think it's pretty, what y'all talked about is awesome. And I want to see, what does this look like in your classroom? How would you do this in a day for that? So I don't know, whichever one of you would like to start. All right.
So in our class, because of the subject area, class discussion can be very tricky to control. What seventh graders will say off the cuff, you guys can hear me, right? Okay. What seventh graders will say off the cuff needs to be controlled in some way. You can't control everything. And I know it may sound a little weird, but especially now that parents at home can also hear what other students are saying, there's that little level of privacy that is now being removed from our little classroom dynamic that we used to have when we were, whatever happened in Miss V's room stayed in Miss V's room. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. So when we are having class discussions, we make sure to take a minute and process what you're going to say before you say it. And sometimes I give them Post-it notes to write it down before it comes out of their mouth. And it's always an I feel or in my experience, or I like to use those sentence starters. And then I always make them directly look at who they are speaking to, because I don't want it to be to me. So if someone has a comment, they'll say, well, in response to what Wyatt said, I feel like, and so it's, having the internet, it's very easy to constantly comment on people because there's a sense of anonymity. But when you're having a class discussion and you want to make a comment, looking at someone in the eye and having a face-to-face conversation, there's a different element of humanity to it. And so I think they miss that on the internet. So for as good as all those things about social media and things are, it also can bring out the absolute worst in some people. So by being able to have a discussion where you look someone in the eye and you say, well, in really, I'd like to respond to what so-and-so said, and I feel and I think, and in my experience, and this may only be my opinion, or I understand what you're saying, but kind of things like that, I think help for classroom discussion. And then the other thing that came to mind, and I don't know if it's a strategy, but I was having a really hard time engaging in discussion with the kids at home. They weren't connecting. And so what I started to do is when we had discussion time, I have, when I create breakout rooms, I make sure every group in the classroom has one kid from at home in the breakout room, so that I can check on them without having to go into 15 breakout rooms. I can walk around my classroom away from my laptop and actually, go in and hear what they're saying and see what they're typing to make sure that everyone, one, is being appropriate, but two, is engaging in class discussion. Because I feel like you learn the most when you are listening to other people's point of view, where we so often are thinking about what we want to say next, as opposed to listening what the person in front of us is saying.
And I love your sentence starters. I think that's great, because I think a lot of the public discourse we're seeing, people aren't thinking about that, and they're just jumping in and yelling and screaming at times and stuff like that. And that pulls them back and makes it, my comment is personal And what I say this, like, I'm not hiding behind anything. And I think it's great to look at the person and talk to them. I think that's important for civic, just our civic responsibility as a person. That's awesome. I love that. What about you, Richardo? What's a strategy or something that you use in your classroom that you think is great that you love to share?
Sure. So I love everything she brought up because those are some of the similar things that I do in my classroom, engagement and strategies and everything like that. I even call it the middle school Socratic method. So where I monitor and I moderate the kids' conversation, because I like to use that in my legal background. I mean, law school, we sat there and there was only one test at the end. And the only way you could kind of engage as to where your understanding was through the communicating and verbalizing your ideas and thoughts. So I try to incorporate that in my teaching style, because assessment doesn't necessarily always have to be a pen, paper, or digital. It can be through the verbalization of ideas and communication and relation that we can build by discourse in the classroom. And so the Socratic middle school Socratic method of doing things and probing questions and digging deeper and challenging the way students think, because I think our kids are at that. And it's so funny that 7th grade, because I remember when I got into teaching, like, don't teach 7th grade, don't teach 7th grade, because that's the hardest year. You get what I'm saying? They're at that perfect crossroad of, I'm still a little kid, but I think I'm an adult. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so challenging the way they think, never ever skewed to the way I think, because I developed my own thoughts and my own beliefs through my own time and experiences. So I want them to just probe the way they think and ask questions and follow-ups and I love what she brought up about accountability, being in the classroom and being engaged with one another and to hold each other accountable, or even to think about some of the things we're saying as we say them, allows the kids maybe to kind of shift the way they think. So engaging conversations, collaboration I'm big on. I think collaboration has been really key on developing. Sometimes the kids learn better from each other than they can learn from you. They may be able to communicate or express an idea that you may not necessarily hit in, me being 29, I'm not 12. You get what I'm saying? So we don't relate, where there's a gap between us. So a peer or a counterpart may be able to relay the information I'm giving to their peer in a way that may be a little bit more comfortable or understandable for them. So collaboration, if it's through electronic means of like collaboration boards and Padlets and all that stuff, or if it's a 7-minute writes where they share their paper or they watch a video and they take notes, and then pairing them together to work together and communicate with one another is one of the things that I think, especially when it deals with civics, because civics is a lot of it's a thinking exercise. You get what I'm saying? A lot of the principles of civics is a thinking exercise. How does it relate to you in your common everyday life? So if you're able to apply it to yourself, I think it helps to strengthen and create a base for the kids to rely on moving forward. So that's collaboration, communication, and also kinesthetic things like movement, like moving around, touching, manipulating stuff. I love that the district, and I don't know who it is, but big shout out to whoever it is, introduced an activity like federalism boxes, where it was a box and there was different items like a car or fake money from a Monopoly game, and them trying to decipher what applied to which level of government. So they're physically seeing these things, and these are things that they interact with on a common basis. So that all those type of things that are more so outside of the normal traditional scheme of sit down and let me give you information, and goes more to the interactive, engaging part of stuff, is what I love to do.
I'm going to definitely have some notes to add to my teaching repertoire after listening to y'all. There's a video. John Green does like a crash course. He does a lot of different crash courses, and one of them is the world history. And the very first one One guy's like, is this going to be on the test? And he says, the test is your life, like when you go to cocktail parties and when you go to work and when you go at the neighborhood barbecue, and you're going to be discussing all of these things. I think what y'all both just said is you're preparing these kids for the test of life. It's not just for that civics EOC, which I know is really important to y'all and to your schools, but it's so much more than that. And so I'd like kind of the last thing I'd like to look at it. And Richardo, you brought this up. Over the summer, we saw an increase of like the awareness and the struggle of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Just recently with the Asian American Pacific Islander kind of hate crimes and the increase there. You see the gender issues and struggles that you see and that kind of stuff. And we as social studies teachers, I really feel like we kind of can influence that and help our students see the struggles and the things of historically marginalized people groups. So what would you suggest as we kind of finish this? Both of y'all have kind of hit on this, but I want to kind of to sit on a little bit more. What are some things that you'd like to say to your students, to the community about what we do in our classroom that as we move forward, we hope to see, and I keep coming back to this because I really feel that our students to be agents of change in all of these areas. The vast majority of teachers in the United States are white, and that does not necessarily reflect the students that we teach. So what are some things that we can continue to do, or some things that we can focus on in this time where it's becoming being brought up in the media, and rightfully so, the struggles of historically marginalized people groups and your Black, Indigenous, people of color, Asian American, Pacific Islander, the GLBT, I just think that got out of order. GLBTQ community. What are some things that we as educators, what's the importance of that and with our students? I'll stop asking and let y'all talk, because I know y'all could probably talk about this for a while. Okay, go ahead, Richardo, you can start.
Sure. I'm really glad you brought this up, because that was actually part of my packet when I was applying for Teacher of the Year, and it's something that is near and dear in my heart. It's the reason why I went to law school. Seeing firsthand some of the, I would say, challenges that marginalized groups and minorities face firsthand gave me and inspired me to go on this journey to be a representative of my community at first. And now it's more of a globalized perspective of just everybody. I want to make change for everybody. Obviously, still remembering where I come from and understanding what the background where I come from. And I'm just going to go on one little personal note, and then I'm going to get off my tangent and go to the question. I remember when Philando Castile, I think that's how you say his name, passed away. And I was sitting in my class, and we were talking about him. We were having a discussion, and he worked at a school himself. I think he worked in the cafeteria. And to see a young man like that die and go through that, I remember it brought tears. And I'm not a crier per se, so it's like to see somebody lose their life in such a way, to know that you didn't wake up that morning expecting that, and to know that kids and people looked up to you and you're now permanently erased from their lives. It's always been a hard concept for me to understand, and it seems to be a little bit more prevalent. Now, I don't know if it's more prevalent because of the introduction of social media and everything like that, because I don't believe that the things that we're seeing and are taking place right now in our society are things that are new. I think these are things that have been systemic and been from the very beginning of our founding of our nation. So I don't want to say like, oh, this is something new and exciting to address. This is something that's been taking place. It's just become a little bit more prevalent and relevant because of the fact that we're actually seeing it now. So to go to your question, and I love the fact that you brought this up. Most of our students, and I teach in a predominantly African American community. Like I said, I grew up in this community. And it's very rare. I think I have the fortunate ability to be one of the only Black male teachers here, which we have quite a few now, but to be able to relate. But then I think my white counterparts, I don't want them to be afraid to engage in the conversation. I think sometimes the fear of engaging in the conversation holds back the ability for the kids to see a different perspective on the topic itself. You get what I'm saying? So I don't believe that my white counterparts should stay away from the topic, but I think engagement needs to be broader of just saying, well, I understand where you're coming from, but also bringing perspectives and knowledge and context to the conversation, not only in the classroom, but outside of it as well. You get what I'm saying? I don't think our students see you, or see, not you, I don't mean you guys, but you get what I'm saying, but see
Oh, yeah.
the majority, the majority of our population in these fine contexts. Like, you get what I'm saying? That's my teacher. That's the police officer. That's this person. They rarely have engagement with that group of people outside of those interactions. So when do we create those interactions that stem from outside of the classroom to also being included in their day-to-day lives or outside in their community? It's very rare. You get what I'm saying? And the perspective of they're always feeling, and I would say, because I've had conversations with students one-on-one, sometimes they feel like they're being talked down to, that the person cannot relate. And I think I've seen counterparts do a great job of relating to the students, even if they don't share the same background or experiences, but having the dialogue and everything like that. And then my last point I want to make is equity over equality. There has to be this emphasis on developing equity. Equality is great, and it is very important because we need equality. But equity, this buy-in, this understanding of developing and nurturing people, so our students, like you said, an agent of change. That's why civics is so important, and that's why it gets me so passionate, because my students, I look at them and I see where they come from, and I see that they don't feel like they own or have equity or skin in this game, or they can't have the ability to build equity because they've always been marginalized. They've always been considered less than. Not all African American students or minority group students are marginalized, but a majority. You get what I'm saying? It's the reason why majority of students who receive referrals or any type of consequences are of color. So when you feel like you belong to a certain segment and this is the only interaction you have with people, that's where the communication breaks down. And we need to go further as a community, not just African Americans, not just Asian Americans, not just white Americans. It needs to be as a community. We need to go forward, and we need to do a better job as adults. And I'm going to say this, and I hope anybody who watches this hears this. We need to do a better job at our discourse in front of our students and young people in general. We have very toxic discourse with just the passing of this election. We have to do way better of having better discourse, because there's perspectives that our students miss because we are too polarized as a nation. So I'm gonna end there. I'm just sorry that's where I'm at.
Very good. Jenny, first off, I love your the poster behind you.
Oh,
I think that's great.
That's my girl, RBG.
Yeah.
So, I love what he was saying. Obviously, he said it very eloquently. His life experience is going to be obviously different than mine. And so when I talk to my students about perspective, empathy is really hard to teach. Understanding, putting yourself in someone else's shoes is really difficult. And I always use this example, and the kids are like, oh, gross. But I'm like, so when, as a woman, I give birth to a child, right? It's our child. It's my husband's and I's child. But I'm going through the process of carrying the child and delivering the child. He's in the room during the delivery, my husband. We are both having a child. His experience and my experience are totally different. We're in this together. We're in the same room. we're sharing an experience, but we're both having two totally different experiences. And our connection to that experience is going to be totally different. And that's kind of like when we talk about race relations or gender identity. You may be in the same room as someone and see the same event and have two totally different experiences while being engaged in the same event. And so it's not until you're able to discuss your feelings, the process, and really be able to verbalize that in a rational manner that people will start to listen and really truly hear you. And you know, I also think that you know, part of what my job is to just guide them to talk to each other. If they're constantly just listening to me, telling them what to think, they don't take ownership of it. It's just they're being talked to and told what to do by another adult in their life. So when you allow them to take some ownership of it, to share their thoughts, or even think about, well, what does this look like to you? What could you do in our classroom, in the hallway, at home? What does it look like to you? And you provide them an opportunity to take ownership of it and make it their own, that they really buy in. And so we really try to focus on perspective and point of view, and being able to understand someone, which just means sometimes you just need to listen. Just the simple act of listening really opens so many, you know, doors for you to understand other people's experiences and life, and provide you a perspective that you may never have had. And one of my favorite things that I do is when we do our unit on citizenship is I have the students interview someone who immigrated here, first generation from another country. And they ask them the questions about the process of moving here and what it was like. And, you know, I've had people interview a grandparent that escaped Castro from Cuba and came over here, who were hidden in boats from Saigon and escaped Vietnam, and were, you know, attacked by pirates. I mean, just these incredible stories that you hear, and it just provides so much perspective about everybody's different journey to get to where they are, how they got to the opinion that they have. And, you know, and so I think that's what really, again, with like what Richardo's saying, when it becomes their own, that's when they care, and that's when they get engaged. And so, you know, a little bit of the history part, we need to feed them, but then having them take that and not change it, but having them take that and say, well, we don't want to cancel out what's happened in history, but can we learn from it? What can we change going forward? We can't change the past, but we can learn from it, and going forward, make some better decisions on how we treat one another. And so I think that has been, especially with this past year, and especially with things happening in our government politically and with the polarization of our political parties, we need to get back to just being kind and empathetic and compassionate, and again, learning how to treat people with respect, even if you disagree with them. It's these foundational pieces that, you know, if not to be a good citizen, but just to be a good human being. And that's where this kind of all stems from. What kind of human being are you? What kind of mark are you leaving? When people talk about you and you leave your legacy, what are they going to say about you? Were you kind? They're not going to care how much money you had. They're going to care how you treated people. That's what they're going to remember. And so, you know, ideas like that is what we really want to harp on to make change. And I am hopeful. They make me hopeful. I'm gonna cry now. Thank you, Richardo. You didn't cry, I cried. No, but yeah, I am very hopeful.
I just want to share my strategy I use, because y'all both inspired me for this. I did it twice this year. Once at the end of our immigration unit, where we talk about, for human geography, we talk about immigration policies and how people move and why they move and countries and things like that. And talk about the historical immigration to the United States, and then also just what's happening with refugees and internally displaced persons and asylum seekers. So I use this strategy here. And then at the very end, in my urban geography unit, and I do a whole series of lessons on race in the urban setting and kind of how systemic decisions were made to segregate societies in the cities, and how a lot of cities were planned specifically to be racially divided and segregated. And so at the end of both of those, I used a discussion post on Canvas, and it was, I used to think, but now I think. And so the students were like, I used to think this about immigration or about segregation, race, all that kind of stuff, but now I think. And my school is a predominantly white, middle-class, suburban school. And so for a lot of them, what they used to, I had to go in there, and I have a senior intern who was here for the second one, but I had to go into the immigration one thinking, I don't know what they're going to say they used to think, but I have to be okay with it as long as but now I think has shown growth. And a lot of that was, I used to think this about immigrants, but now I think, and it was such a different perspective. I used to think a negative, but now I understand the struggle that they do, and people aren't just leaving and they're not coming here to steal our jobs and do this. They're trying to do this, make it a better life. Or I used to think segregation was done in the 60s and 70s, but now I realize the impact of segregation is still there. We talk about how redlined neighborhoods are historically hotter. They have higher death rates in the cities. And so a lot of those things, the students they come to that conclusion by the study and the geographic nature of it. And they pull in a lot of the things that y'all talk about in civics. But that's really our goal as social studies teachers is, okay, so, and I think you said this a little bit, Jenny, that the history, we can't change the history, but we can learn from the mistakes and we can move forward. And so we have to, my goal is to say, hey, this is what you used to think. And why was it wrong? I'm not going to tell you, why is not wrong, but why is it, to a degree, there's a lot of problems with that. And how can we shift that mindset to a more inclusive, open place to be? And so I love hearing y'all's perspective and kind of what we can do as educators to empower our students, our white students to be advocates for our Black, Indigenous, people of color, our Black students and our people and Indigenous and people of color students to really stand up and take hold and force change for better of their people. I was listening on the radio, and there was this past weekend, there was an Asian American Pacific Islander protest on 50, which was part of it was spearheaded by high school students. And I love that I saw these high school students of Asian American descent saying, you know what, this isn't right. And we're not going to take this anymore. We're going to stand up. We have, and I'm hopeful for what could be with the students and the future that we have with them. Well, we talked a whole lot longer than I thought we would, which I absolutely loved this conversation. I did not realize it was as the time it was, but I didn't want to share because this is the last thing, and it's going to be a consistent, constant question that because it's fun, and we talked a lot of heavy stuff. So just, hey, during the pandemic, people have picked up different shows that they've watched or books that they've read, or maybe there's a new group that you picked up on in this and you've continued on. So what is something that y'all are reading or watching or listening to these days that maybe something that I can introduce me to a new thing or introduce the people who may watch this? Who went first last time? It's Richardo. So Jenny, we'll go with you.
Okay, so this is staying relevant piece, and so the kids, I have to try to stay with it. So I am being asked to watch anime, and I'm doing it. I have watched my first Bollywood movie over the weekend. So I've watched Bollywood. I've been asked to watch K-dramas. So those are, Korean dramas that are a big deal a lot with my girls right now because I have, we got a pretty good population of Asian students at our school and quite a few Latino students as well. So they ask me about once a week to make a suggestion for me to watch something new, and I do. And I love Bollywood. I've decided it's like an Indian Lifetime movie network for people. So I'm loving it. It's like love these romantic comedies, and they're really amazing.
They have some of them have some pretty cool musical numbers.
Yes, always at the end. And I try with the anime. I really try. It's just, I get it and I can appreciate it. It's not necessarily my thing, but I have to keep up with all of these people they're making references to. So I make like little cheat sheets. I'm like, I gotta look that up later. I don't know what that is, So, yeah, but honestly, Netflix, thank you. The Bollywood, the K-dramas, so the anime, just trying to, discover new things like that has been fun. It's been really fun, and the kids love it. So, especially the girls, especially my girls. So it's been fun.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, Ricardo.
So I guess in terms of doing stuff that the kids are engaged in and some of the things that they're interested in, go to that perspective. I do watch anime. I can't get into all of them because some of them are a little bit too left field for me. Then I'm like, wait, what? And everything like that. And I mean, these kids will have they can have a class about some of these animes. They can have a whole seminar about some of the animes that they watch. So I'll catch up on a few animes like Attack on Titan or Naruto or something like that, or Dragon Ball Z. I will watch those and we'll have conversations. My kids will come over. I even I hate to say this because this is a lot of money, but I even convinced myself to buy an Xbox, the newest one, and some of my students play games, so I'll play with them and everything like that, and I'll engage with them that way, just kind of to, like I said, I want them to know that I'm human too, and it's my way of relaxing. I don't have a mic because I don't want to get into the whole conversation. You get what I'm saying? But, just to engage with them that way. But some of the things that I find myself reading and doing as a result of the pandemic, I've always been big on podcasts, but podcasts have really ramped up for me. So if it's not every morning, I'm listening to the Daily from the New York Times to hear some discussions, or Radio Lab, or This American Life and stuff like that. And then other podcasts in different realms. Just, I like to hear different perspectives on things. I don't like to wed myself to one perspective. Excuse me. I don't like to wed myself to one perspective. I know I have my own belief system, but just to hear different things. So I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I've been watching new shows. Like we've kind of got into we're in forms of government right now. So I kind of watch. And any kids watching this, do not watch this show. I am telling you this now. The Handmaid's Tale. I'm watching that now.
That book from a long
Yeah,
time.
and I'm watching the show. I'm not watching the book. I mean, I'm not reading the book. Sorry, but I'm watching the show, and it deals with government and rights and all that stuff. I wish it could have been a little bit more of a PG format, but it's definitely a hard R or TVMA. So, but I like shows like that challenge my perspectives, or I get to think about things and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to make myself more of a well-rounded person. And I think another thing is, and this is not as fancy or cool, I'm trying to find that me time. It's been a long year. You get what I'm saying? So doing more things outside, and you really find your niche in doing other things outside of your normal course of events. So, I haven't picked up anything really cool or interesting. I don't really have any books that I'm really into right now, which I'm looking for some. But I've been trying to just make myself more well-rounded and find a way to relax. So it's doing different things and introducing myself to different things. That's why I bought a $600 Xbox. And yeah.
I'd like to comment on your Xbox comment. Are you trying to blame these kids for you getting a new gaming system? Because that's the takeaway I'm getting right now. Ricardo's wife. No, I'm kidding.
I don't think
my wife. Oh, the kids told me I have to get it, babe. I mean, oh man, like yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
that's amazing. And yeah, since y'all shared your most random stuff, what was interesting during the pandemic, my wife and I, we watched all the Marvel movies in chronological order, starting with Captain America, ending with Spider-Man: Far From Home. It was a crazy ride, but they're so much fun. But I have 3 kids of my own, and my daughter has this show on Disney Plus that she loves. It's The Secrets of Sulphur Springs. And for some reason, we watch the new one every week, and she's so excited. She cuddles up right next to me, and we think, what's going to be the next cliffhanger, and how's it going to end? So I love that more than anything. So I'll watch those cheesy, shows with them, and they love the Pokemon and all those things. So and then I just finished Jason Reynolds' Stamped. Crud, I can't remember what it's based on Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, Anti-Racism and You, but it's for young adults. And so I just finished that one. It's an amazing book. It kind of follows period parts of the United States. He says it's a not history book, but it's kind of a history book. But it says, here's some of the racist policies that were created at this time, and how there was struggle and fight there, and people who were trying to be anti-racist and assimilationists and things like that. And then it traces its way through. It even looks at some of our major historical leaders and says, here's some of the anti-racist policies that they had, but here's some of the racist ideas that they had, and some of the ways that they did it. And just kind of that struggle that you saw, with people like Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, through there. And so it was it was a quick read because it's a young adult book, but it's really a good kind of look at a new approach to American history for that. So that's what it is. But I would like to thank both of you for your time. I had a great time. It went a lot. It went really quick. I learned a lot. I have a lot more respect for both of you as civic educators. And I know the difference that you desire to see in your students. And I think we all share the same goal of making agents of change from our students, that society will be a better place because of them. So thank you so much for all you do and how you represent Orange County and your schools and your students well in the world of civics education. So thank you for taking this time to talk to me.